we're doing it.
Welcome. Welcome to Playwrights Foundation, second episode of our video podcast, Creating Spaces, which is giving time and space for playwrights to come together and have conversation about the changing landscape of theater and their practice in this time of COVID-19. Today we have our host, Lauren Gunderson, with us, who has been all over the interwebs hosting many classes and various things. So you should go check out her online classes in this time. And we also have guests with us, Geetha Reddy and Jonathan Spector, who are longtime alumni of Playwrights Foundation and have been a part of our resident playwright program and the Bay Area Playwrights Festival and our Ref Reading series. And so we're grateful to have them here with us. And just a little bit about their work. Geetha Reddy just actually premiered a new play, a one-person adaptation of Mahabharata, which recently premiered at Ubuntu Theater Company and is also known for Far, Far Better Things. So I hope you check out her work. And Jonathan Spector recently had his play Eureka Day that has been premiering across the country in the past year or two, and it actually centers around vaccines, which is a really interesting conversation in this world that we're in right now. But also has a new play, This Much I Know, that is going to be developed at New Harmony Project and Playpen this summer in this new world that we are in. And so he may talk a little bit about that. We'll see. I'm gonna hand it over and turn off my video and let the playwrights take it away with their conversation. So thank you for joining us.
Hi, all. So basically, this is a chance for us to kind of catch up with where we are at this moment. I hope that I will convince these two incredible playwrights to give some how-tos, some tips, some things that are making their life easier or more creative, or also give us permission to not be creative at all, if that's where they are too. And we can just share some realness. But yeah, it's such a privilege to talk to you. You are both incredible, not Bay Area playwrights, not solely Bay Area playwrights, but national voices, and have meant so much to me. Geetha and I got to collaborate, and it's still one of my favorite wild projects that we did. We wrote a play called Gila about Henrietta Lacks' story for Theater First. And Jonathan I've known for a long time. His play Eureka Day, an award-winning play, super, splashy production, well-reviewed, massively well-reviewed in New York recently. And just y'all are both charming and delightful human beings. So why don't we just start with Jonathan, and you can tell us where you are in the world and kind of how we're finding you today. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm in my home in Oakland, where I live with my wife and 4-year-old daughter. And I would say in general, I'm really struggling with the lack of time that is not occupied by parenting. And how little time there is to write, and how little sort of consistent time there is, and which also maybe contributes to sort of just like a general feeling of being unmoored from time altogether. Like I don't know anymore if something happened a week ago or a month ago. Like it's just the fog of like since this began has sort of enveloped everything. But I'm working a little bit. I have this play that's going to have some virtual workshops later that I've sort of been able to dig back into and have been started to crack open a little bit. But I'm finding that I think in my normal life, usually my estimates of how long it will take me to get something done, I need to multiply by 2. And in this time, I need to like take that number and multiply it by 3. Or how long it will actually take me to get through something. But I'm working really hard to like try to sort of just work without any sense of guilt about not working, or about like the pace of the work, or not getting anything done. And I don't know that I've achieved that, but it's going okay. And I've sort of let my, like this piece I'm working on, I sort of realized I was like, oh, there's this book that I really need to read before I can kind of go forward, and have a little bit of anxiety about carving out the time to read the book. but I'm just trying to sort of be okay with that. And then I'm also starting to, as I think a lot of playwrights are almost everyone I know is thinking about this as well, that I'm working on some TV stuff too, and thinking like, well, maybe I should be turning a little more of my attention to that, because who knows when theater is coming back. And I think it's be nice to have other things to work on while we wait for the theater to return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about you, Geetha? Where are you and where are you?
I'm in my home in Burlingame, California. And I'm also struggling like Jonathan, but for different reasons, I think. Like I'm feeling like a lot of, I've been very caught up in thinking about like the various losses of this period. And I think like it's not necessarily the best place to be living in. And while I have probably more time than you guys with your younger kids, I'm not used to having a house where there's like, everybody just feels totally free to come up and interrupt me at any time, which makes it very hard to kind of dig in and find that like groove of focused creative time. Just like feel very fitful, sometimes like feeling super creative, and sometimes just nothing is coming and I'm filled with anxiety about the fact that I can't do anything. But one thing I have been doing is just being very respectful of that moment. And so even like there was a point where I was almost about to go to bed and I had an idea and I was like, oh, and this is what would happen and this was what would happen. I was like, I'm just going to sit down and do it.
Oh, that's smart.
And like instead of before, I'd normally be like it'll still be there in the morning, but I'm not so sure about that anymore, if that energy is still going to be there for it in the morning. And then I'm doing some workman-like things like Jonathan, and kind of cataloging ideas and going back to old plays and thinking about TV and like what, that was going to be this period for me anyway, but it was going to be more about reaching out and asking other people what they think I should be doing. And instead like looking more inward. This period.
That's a smart thing to remind yourself to. I need to get better at that, of not just assuming that if I'm not being creative, it's a fault, as opposed to a break. Because I, like you, will have creative periods and feel alive and sparkly and go. I have something. And then the next hour I don't, and I feel bad. You're like, no, it doesn't have to feel bad. Just feel different.
Yeah. I mean, I think writers for centuries have always talked about the idea of, you just put your ass in the chair and you work on your work and you get into that habit. And I think that is very true, and that like writers write. But, when you're in the middle of this like crisis and there's just like so much new information happening, you wouldn't be writing like that if you were sick. And it's almost like, even though we aren't actually sick, we're kind of, processing an illness.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also a big believer in the idea that reading is writing.
Yes.
And,
right.
I think if I can be spending as much of my time reading rather than just sort of like panic scrolling through Twitter about the news, then I can feel good about how I'm spending the portion of my day when I'm not entertaining a 4-year-old, and just sort of be okay with that and know that it's sort of part of the process. And part of it is that the ground beneath our feet is so soft right now. Like we don't know what the world, like I don't know what this world is right now, and I really don't know what the world is going to look like in 6 months. And I think that presents certain challenges towards writing, because is the thing you're writing like taking place in the past before this moment? Is it like in some like alternate universe where this didn't happen in the future? Or is it like, or are you trying to imagine past this moment, which I think is really hard to do.
It is fascinating looking back at American history education and world history education, and I was never taught about the 1918 flu. And that's, of course, what we're comparing this to in ready and I think accurate ways. And it is amazing to think that was kind of so meaningful and profound, and then not. And that is exactly what this will be. It'll be a thing that we reference. There will be a normal, Lord knows when and what it will be. But that to me is what someone brought it up in terms of looking at the history of the 19th Amendment. Of course, this is the 100th anniversary, et cetera, et cetera. And the flu happened right in the middle of it, and the middle of the suffrage work. And like, I never knew that. I didn't even think of that. How on earth would you try to go about adding an amendment to the Constitution when everyone is in lockdown and terrified of each other? And, you know, it's amazing to think about what this moment will look. It just made me think about when we write after this, things set after this, what is it? Do we talk about it all the time? Do we talk about it like, no, that was a thing and it happened? And, you know, it's a wild thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of curious about what your guys' thought about this is. I feel like I've heard on multiple outlets or in conversations with people like, oh, well, nobody's going to want to do a pandemic play after this. Nobody's going to want to see it. But like, when you think about, like, people still watch World War II movies, although we don't watch Spanish flu movies. But the British television is almost all just post-war recovery dramas, right?
Yeah.
What, like, do you think that wisdom that people are saying is like, oh, nobody wants a pandemic play, makes sense? I mean, it doesn't really kind of ring true to me.
I don't know. I feel like I wonder what the tangents are, things that are kind of tangentially related to what we've all been through. I think science plays about workers in hospitals, plays that really focus in a kind of a, like Martina Majok's plays, focusing on a kind of class of person who is not, sitting on a couch in a nice apartment in Manhattan and talking about their problems. Like, no, they're workers. They go to work, they come home, they deal with like, is there a different priority that we put on the characters of our stories that may not be set, the moment shelter in place hit San Francisco, but how does it change us otherwise? I should have apologized for my cat, who just loves a Zoom meeting more than anything in the world. But yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. Have y'all thought a lot in at all, or are you refusing to think about any sort of writing for streaming, Instagrammy, YouTubey, Facebook Livey theater, or are you just like, nope, we're gonna, or have people asked to do readings of your work in that format? Do you enjoy them? What do y'all think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to have some conversations with people about it. I haven't done any writing for it yet. There's something that I think feels a little bit potentially interesting about it, but also, I don't know, sort of spending more time on Zoom makes me want to crawl out of my skin a little bit. I mean, I'm gonna have some Zoom sort of readings and workshops of things in development coming up that I'm sure will be of some use. Like, it's very clear there's things you just can't get in Zoom. Like, you can't get a sense of like rhythm and energy and timing because just the way that people's Wi-Fi signals or whatever sort of slows things down. But I think there are other things you can see. So that I think will be interesting. But I haven't seen any. Oh no, I did see a little piece of a reading of a play of mine on Zoom, which was fine. But I think I'm less interested in sort of like, as I think a lot of people feel, like in seeing plays written for the stage on Zoom than if you're doing something trying to write for that medium. Although, and I guess we'll all find out quickly what the limitations of this medium are.
Yeah.
We did a selection from Mahabharata for Ubuntu, and we were thinking, oh, well, maybe we can do the whole play, and we started rehearsing it, and we were like, oh, this is just never going to work. It was such a physical production, and it required so much space and so much interaction with the audience that we were like, okay, I think half an hour is really actually all we can sustain and ask from the audience, because it was just such a wild ride. But I was asked to write something for like specifically a Zoom play, which I did, and I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens.
It's all a big experiment, and I will say whether it succeeds or not is less important to me. It's proving that the arts are agile and innovative and like, we don't know, we'll try. That always seems like the right answer, even if the result is like, we tried and we never want to do it again. Also a helpful thing to know. But I will say we did a reading sing through of our musical, which has like 19 people in it. And we had our musical director like playing live. And it was a big old Zoom gallery of our actors, and it was amazing. It worked really well, actually. We learned a ton, enough to dive into the rewrites and have great conversations afterwards, asking the things that we wanted to ask. So I think developmentally, at least that format was good. Now, this is a musical that was pretty far along in the process, and we knew very specific things we wanted to kind of look at, and the actors, a lot of them had been involved for a while, so they kind of knew it. But that was a really interesting moment for me to go, oh, we could do this. This is okay. I don't know if I'd want to watch a 2.5-hour play. But I don't know. I haven't tried yet.
Yeah. A theater company is going to be doing Playground is going to be doing a reading of an older play of mine called Safe House that was done at SF Playhouse. Yeah. And I'm very curious about how it's going to work because it's a play that has just a ton of fighting in it. And a lot of it is moved forward with fighting, but I'm we'll have to.
Great. I don't know. I mean, I will say it almost challenges perhaps the valiance of the stage direction will return to the American theater, because there's something about hearing a very clear stage direction in whatever simple and emotional monotone that is actually shockingly powerful, I think. So having somebody say he beats the crap out of him, his nose is broken, his, whatever, my mind does all the work. I don't need to see an actor be like, So it could be interesting.
And I think the other thing of it that I'm realizing, even in the little bit that I've begun moving this direction, is at least with development processes, like so much of what is valuable of that is the conversation that you're having with other people and the expectation of other people.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna talk about this thing. I had this idea, and then there's this deadline because we're gonna be back in rehearsal, and it's as much that as the actual work.
Yes.
that is useful and focusing of attention. And so I think a lot of that can still happen even if we're not in a room together.
Yeah, that's right. Have you been watching any plays online, or you're like, I'm going to read my novel and be off screens?
You know what? I went down a YouTube rabbit hole of watching the John Barton playing Shakespeare videos. Have you guys seen these?
No.
The Royal Shakespeare Company, it's Ian McKellen and I keep wanting to say Jean-Luc Picard, Patrick Stewart.
Jean-Luc Picard.
And them all really young and working through Shakespeare scenes, and that's been it's been.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Interesting and relaxing. I really recommend it if you can poke around.
What about you, Jonathan?
The only thing I've seen is that, I don't know if it's still up, that the organization On the Boards in Seattle made all of their content free, and so I watched their Rude Mex play The Method Gun that I had been hearing about for years and had never seen. And that was great, although it was also, particularly for that kind of show, which is such a piece of performance, it's such a cool piece, and it made me so wish I had been in the audience, because so much of the it's the energy of being in that room that you just you can't quite get when you're watching from a screen. I think the rest of my screen time has been occupied with television rather than Zoom plays.
Oh yeah, totally. I've been loving the National Theater productions, which are so exquisitely filmed, which is of course why they work so well on streaming formats and TV. But the Globe Theatre in London is putting a free Shakespeare play every week, and that one's interesting too, because in that context you see the audience. A lot of the shows are done, of course, outside in the open air Globe. The sunlight is there, and so you see people. And it actually, that's part of what keeps drawing me back, is actually seeing the audience. I think streaming theater, I'm realizing, does not work if there's not an audience. So some of the productions that have been so wonderful is hearing the laughter, hearing the applause, hearing the gasp. That's what makes it feel like theater to me. Otherwise it feels like bad TV or something. I don't know what it feels like. But that's been a fun thing to kind of.
The video production of I and You that you had from the UK was really successful. Was there an audience for that? I'm trying to remember.
There wasn't. They did it on a different night. But I think if we did it again, I think that would be, it was such an exquisite production, and the performers were, I mean, exemplary. I don't even have the words to describe how kind of luminous they were and sensitive and all of that. And that's a very intimate play. But I did miss the audience. There were times when it felt like that's a shared moment that you just don't get if you don't have the audience there. But we did that way before. This was 2 years ago when we were doing that specifically for Instagram. So I think that's why they chose to do it very intimately, because most people, when they're making an Instagram video, don't have an audience. They're being like, very good, that's hilarious.
I feel like the first, whatever it was, week or two that we were in lockdown, and suddenly all of this content was becoming available, and it was really, really exciting. And I have watched some of the like 24-hour plays, and then it started to shift into like feelings of anxiety that I have this sort of like mounting stack of things that I should be watching.
I usually was like, well, I can't see that because I'm not in New York. And now you're like, yes, you can. Why haven't you? Where's your think piece? Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting time. Do you feel like when you are finding moments of creativity, there's something that really helps you focus? Is it a like turn off your phone kind of vibe? Is it you need a certain kind of beverage or something like that? How do you get in the zone when you are feeling it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think all writers have their own routines, and relying on the routines you've built is really important, so even whether I'm forcing myself to sit down or whether I'm having a moment of inspiration, like I just talked about before, it's like, headphones, same music, my cup of tea,
Yeah. Time.
And telling people not to disturb me.
Yeah.
Is my new thing.
It's always a room of one's own. That's the thing.
Right. Yeah. It's like that, did you read that Stephen King book on writing?
Yeah.
He's like, you need a room with a door. That's like what you need to be a writer.
Yes, right. Specify the door. Make sure.
Yeah. I mean, I have, used one of the programs to turn off the internet on my computer, which is the only way that I can do it.
Yeah, I do that too.
Got to. Otherwise, I'm just too accessible. It's very funny to be so isolated. We are so accessible.
Well, there's also this expectation that you are now available at all times for all things because everyone's home.
Well, it's funny because you can feel so irrelevant as an artist in this time, but it is interesting as creative artists, as opposed to interpretive artists, how in demand we actually are, and how many requests I've had, and how busy, because other people need our work to do their work.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that at least in that we can take some small solace.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that's a great way to say it. I've been trying to articulate what that feeling is. I think you just did it for me, is this sense of everyone suddenly is like, oh, the writers, call all the writers. And we're like, we've been here. Yeah, it's such an interesting time because like every sector of society, this is certainly exposing practices and habits that have been there for a long time that are suddenly quite problematic, or the exposure of their problematism is obvious now. And I think our field is the same. I think the idea of how much is asked of us for, less pay than it should be and less credit and all of this stuff. I think this is a chance in many parts of our incredible field to kind of say what Elizabeth Warren was saying the other day. I was watching her feed and she was just saying, I hope we don't go back. Let's not go back. Let's go forward. Let's take this moment to do some resetting and to do some rethinking. And instead of just stacking up the old system again, let's rethink how we stack. And I hope
That's
that
something
happens.
I've been thinking a lot about even before the pandemic in the last year is like, what is theater and like, what is the function of theater and like, what does it mean? Like for the people who come to the theater, what does it mean to be writing for these people? And like, and I'm very curious about like what is going to be relevant when theaters reopen and whether there's going to be a huge like consolidation of power in the theater. Like, are all the large organizations going to like just suck up all the energy and all the grants and all the resources and everything else will be decimated? And then how will they adjust? Will they want to just go back to their old normal or will there be something new? And I'm not seeing signs of readjustment yet. It still feels like everybody's scrambling.
Yeah,
but I am interested to see as small seeds of action start happening where they take us.
Is it the forest fire where there is a lot of loss, and then like the new growth, the new theater companies, the new scrappy, bright ideas with new energy, and what does that mean? I certainly don't wish for any theater to close. But it is an interesting thing. And there was an interesting shakeup happening in theater anyway, right? With all of these new artistic directors, so many of them thinkers of color and women. And it's really kind of exciting to see this new, what is theater now? And then we get hit with this and go, what is theater now?
Yeah, I had actually been working on a play that I think has now been forever abandoned because of this pandemic, about a sort of theater company going through a leadership transition, and I had interviewed a bunch of new artistic, like a ton of people around the country about like going through the hiring process and sort of what it was like coming into this new institution and the way they were treated by the board of directors or by the and it's, I mean, I think at this moment there, because the theaters are going to be so struggling to survive, there's not going to be much appetite for a play that is criticizing the structures. But I do, I mean, it's this incredible moment because there was already this feeling of like, well, there's this sort of new generation of people inheriting these institutions, many of which were already in such a precarious place because just the structures are not sound, and then just inevitably some of those are going to struggle to succeed, and where they are going to be, were those people going to be blamed, when it was, as a risky, quote unquote, risky choice, and that was why the institution failed, rather than that it had been accumulating debt for 20 years or whatever. And now, I feel my heart just really goes out to all of these people who've just, been running these theaters, many of them for like less than a year, and now you're suddenly spending all your time talking about like, who are we going to lay off this week, and how, it's heartbreaking. And
which is part of why I think the idea to do some version of anything is good. Is I think that there is, I appreciate the thoughtfulness of people making sure that whatever steps we take forward in terms of becoming more agile digitally, how we choose plays, how we make them so that we can pivot quickly if something like this happens again, or if it's not resolved soon. I appreciate trying to make sure that there is room to be thoughtful about all of those, but because, I don't know, without the theaters, there's less theater. There's not no theater. There's definitely theater without theaters, but so many of all of us have those relationships, and the relationship with audiences, and the audience's relationships with that place and that institution, that I think is worth certainly examining and interrogating, but worth saving. And of course, I think Regina Victor wrote a beautiful piece asking that question, or interrogating the idea of the building, the place, the institution versus the artist and the art. And sometimes those are the same things, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes we try to save the thing instead of the people, or we think the thing is the people. And trying to, I think this is a fabulous time to pull apart those ideas and make sure that even if we say, yes, I'm donating to Oregon Shakespeare Festival because I love them and I love Nataki and I can't wait to, all of that, that means that we are donating to the people who make that place what it is, not just the name and the logo and the the website and
air conditioning.
I just saw a headline yesterday, in the Chronicle about how some localities are going to put a freeze on their minimum wage increases as a result of this. And it made me think of, there had been such a, I think, positive conversation in theater in the past couple of years about the way artists are compensated, and theater starting to do a better job of that, or at least think about how they wanted to approach that, and find ways to try and be more equitable about that. And I just really, similarly to these counties that are freezing their minimum wage increase, I wonder kind of what the post-COVID landscape looks like for artists who are already going to be struggling in an economy that is going to be in bad shape for a very long time, and these institutions that are going to be sort of hanging on by their fingernails, and how how you're going to balance all of those needs.
And what do playwrights do? I mean, this is the Playwrights Foundation. We are a foundation of and for the playwright. What do we do? And I'm asking you, but also I'm thinking about a conversation, one of these interview classes about the director and playwright relationship I had with Eric Ting a week or so ago. What's a week? I don't know, amount of days ago. He said something interesting, which I kind of assumed that we would go back to the place where we were aiming away from, I thought, of small plays, intimate plays, 1 person, 2 person, 3 person. What's the smallest, most producible, little tiny thing? And yes, I think we will have some of those, a lot of those. And those are not bad choices if they are safe. Safe doesn't always necessarily mean uninspired and everything. I'm excited. I love a challenge, kind of a prompt. But Eric Ting said he wants big. He's like, if I'm going back to the theater, I want some big ass theater. Like I want lots of roles, and some in a very specific labor conversation. Let's make parts to give people, to pay them to do their art and fill the stage with all the people to create that community and insist that this story be told, and through the telling of it, help the community of artists and of people and all of it, which was an interesting thing to kind of say. Of course, he's so thoughtful and so visionary in that way, but it was a really kind of fun idea to go, yeah, you're right. Enough with the this theater. I want this theater. Right? My cat's getting very excited about this idea. But what do you think about that? Are you playing the kind of game with yourself of like, what would I write if somebody says, all right, you have 2 actors and no set, or are you like, what I'm going to write after this is?
I mean, I think that's kind of what I've been thinking about, is like, I think my hope is that there'll be that, obviously people are desperate to see other people and to be amongst other people, but there'll be some sort of like exuberance about going back to live performance and remembering that the theater is different than Netflix. It is different than watching something on TV, and writing for that audience, and writing for people who want to be there and want to be having a live experience, and really putting pressure on myself as a writer is like, what will like bring them forward and bring the actors out off the stage into the audience.
Makes me sad to even think about it. I mean, sad in a happy way. Happy, sad, happy, yeah. Just happy.
I mean, you have to like write from a positive place, like a hopeful place.
I love it. I was just thinking, that makes me think of the like polite applause when the lights are going down and the show's beginning. I need thunderous applause. Like the first show I'm in, I'm like, yeah. I'm gonna go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel, I sometimes wonder, like why people go to the theater, and I wonder if I didn't make theater, if I would be the kind of person who went to the theater. And I feel like this time has made me, reminded me why it's important to sort of the meaning of just like gathering in a space with other people in that way, that I think is sometimes easy to forget.
It's the church of it for me. I've always said that, and I didn't quite know exactly what I meant, or I thought I knew what I meant, and then now that's what I mean. I mean, the coming together, the like, wow, all of us decided this day to come together and see this thing together, you know. I mean, the interesting thing when I was talking to Eric, because I was saying that Geetha and I were going to go together to see his production of Gloria at ACT the day it was canceled. And I was texting Eric saying, can't wait to see your show tonight. He's like, don't go, it's canceled. And Geetha was like, no, it's not. Oh, wait, they just sent the email. Yes, it is. So the immediacy, the instancy, the like ephemerality, suddenly everything is there and then it's not. And I do feel that the congregation is something I keep thinking about how much it's the same thing with the live streamed theater that don't have an audience. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like theater. It doesn't feel complete. And, you know, that's part of it.
The thing of where you hear, and actually Molly Aronson-Gelb talks about this, about like loving to hear the audience laughing when you're not laughing, right? But somebody over there thought it was funny.
Oh, I thought what I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the gasp when people get things at different times, or they're like, like, wow, that meant a lot to her. He did not care about that line at all, but she really thought that was amazing. It's the like biology of a play, you know, it lives and breathes and burps and wiggles and does all sorts of things that are kind of out of the control of the perfection of a form like TV or film, where somebody was saying that if you want perfect, make a film. If you want living and breathing, go to the theater, which I miss it. We have just a few more minutes of this conversation. Of course, I could talk all day with these two geniuses of the form. Are there any kind of thoughts that make you hopeful at the moment? Let's end with some hope, even if that's not your state of normal. That was my cat butt. I try to get not the butt on the screen, but
just the voyeur. Probably the people watching it are playwrights. I mean, I think that the thing that I'm thinking a lot about is about being watchful. You know, we're going through something big right now. It's almost like, you know, when you watch a tornado and you're fascinated by like the slow rotation of it, and you're seeing things fall out of it. You know, like being really watchful of those things. And then afterward, we're going to have to go crawl through the debris and find that thing that we were watching and write about it. So like, hang on to what's happening and carry it with you. And it'll germinate in the future is what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, vigilance. To Jonathan's point, reading is writing. So is just being aware and thinking and taking it in and making yourself take note is writing too. What are you thinking, Jonathan? What's hopeful or moments of hope for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have moments of hope that it will be over, and we will return. You know, those of us who are able will sort of return to the world, and that I think the hope is that it will. Only because I've been sort of seeped in all of this. Behavioral psychology stuff for this play I'm working on, like that one of the things is that we are bad, like we as humans are bad with a sense of duration in judging it, and the hopeful part of that is like once this is over, even though now it feels endless, retrospectively we will feel like, oh, that was a thing that we went through, and it won't feel like it is our whole world forever in the way that it does now. But I think, and as Geetha said, I think also just sort of like being awake to the experience as much as you can when we're having it, because I think we will be processing this for a long time, even if it's not people writing plays about having Zoom conversations. I think just this disruption in our lives is gonna, inform us for a long time to come.
Yeah. Well, with those thoughts and ideas, and with a great thank you for your time and your genius, we'll wrap it up. Jessica may come back on and say another thank you from from our dear Playwrights Foundation.
Here I am. It's like coming in from another room. But yeah, thank you so much for this conversation. It's such a gift in this time, for you to gather together and be here and share in community. I realized I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of this, but I'm Jessica Bird-Beza, the new Executive Artistic Director at Playwrights Foundation. And, thank you for tuning in and supporting Playwrights Foundation in this time. And I hope you'll continue to be with us on this journey as we are supporting playwrights in this time and continuing to bring forth voices to the forefront. And we'll be developing 5 new plays this summer in our Bay Area Playwrights Foundation, which we'll be announcing very soon. So I hope that you will continue to be a part of the journey. And if you can, donate a few dollars. There's a link in the description. If you can't, it's okay. But I think that's all. Thank you.
Thanks for everything you do, Jessica. Thanks, John.
Thanks. Bye.